There we go. But we do record this so that people can watch it, rewatch it, share it with others. And I just want to introduce myself this morning and welcome you to this meeting, which is of the Community to Community program at After the Fire. And what we endeavor to do with this program is to bring folks together from different fire impacted regions so we can share ideas and best practices, problem solve together. And what's really remarkable is each time there's a wildfire, they're different, but there's some same things as well. And if we can pay it forward, that's what we try to do. My name's Pamela Van Helsema. I've been with After the Fire now for several months. I am a fire survivor from Sonoma County, California. My home was burned in the Tubbs fire in October of 2017. I am happy to report that I am back home. My house is rebuilt, but boy, it's a process. It's complex. It's basically a part-time, and it could be a full-time job for someone to really pull this off. And so understanding that, it's always been in my mind that we need to help folks through this rebuild, and to be able to think through the options, think through what's involved and what the considerations are. And it's so complex in so many layers. There's the money, there's the insurance, there's the permitting, there's the how and the who and the where and the why and all of those things. And so it was interesting to me, one organization that I really, really love, United Policyholders, who does amazing work with insurance work, had a webinar last week about rebuilding. And it was a very different kind of chat than I'm planning today. So if you have a chance to catch their recording of that one, it's interesting. They talked about a lot of innovative building materials and methods. What I want to focus on today with our special guests is just thinking things through before you get started. How do you have to kind of conceptualize this big multi-year project before you make big decisions? And can you do that along with your community? If you are in your community as a community leader, are there things that you can do to help bring the community together to think through those things? And each family or business owner is going to make their own choices based on the information gathered. But if you can help support the community and provide what perspectives, what considerations, what things should you be thinking through before you make these big choices, and also lead with the hope that people do come back, but never require or shame people for not coming back. So those are some of the thoughts that I lead into this discussion: how to plan for rebuilding after wildfire, and then some practical tips to share. I'm delighted that we have folks from Paradise, Butte County, California on the call. And we have Amy Rohr, who is a professional in the construction industry, co-owner of Rohr Construction and executive director of their Valley Contractors Exchange, who is also a fire survivor. She's going to lead off our discussion today with a presentation of all those things especially from the builder's perspective, hoping that people consider. After that, Charles Brooks, who is the COO of After the Fire. He's also the founder of Rebuild Paradise Foundation. He is going to be talking about innovations that they were able to put in place through Rebuild Paradise, especially with their home plan library. And I really want him to talk about all the things that went into that, why they did that, what they had to think through in order to get that program off the ground. And then lastly, I've invited Sasha Butler, who is from Santa Rosa. And I have so much love and respect for Sasha. We went through that whole rebuild process together, and she was a block captain in our organization, Coffee Strong, to help our neighborhood of 1,400 houses that burned come back. And she has been a fierce advocate and resource for people who have had lots of challenges. And I asked her if she could share some of the insights 4 years later of maybe things that could have been done differently if we had only known. So I think that is golden to hear what she has to share. And so think about these things. Feel free to add questions in the chat, and then we'll also have Q&A time at the end of the call. But I'm going to introduce now Amy. Amy, would you lead us off and share some of your information about the rebuild? And thank you so much for being here.
I will. Thanks, Pam, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. You should all be seeing my screen there where it's rebuilding after a disaster. I'm going to speak primarily to the practical sides of rebuilding, things to consider when you're hiring a contractor, navigating that whole process. And then I think as for, the building methods, we're covering 3 different states here. Building codes are going to differ between state and state. I'm in California. I'm a campfire survivor, as Pamela said. We recently moved back home, got back home in June. So it was 2.5 years after the fire, which is just astounding sometimes to think about. It's a journey, it's a marathon. It doesn't happen quickly, even if you think it's going to happen quickly. So with that, I'm just going to talk to the practical side, and then we can kind of think outside the box with alternative build methods later in our discussion. So I'm going to share with you first the 10 tips for hiring a contractor. This is taken off of the California Contractor State Licensing Board. I'm not an expert in Washington or Oregon, but I'll do my best to kind of speak to that. But I think we can all agree that the basic, the 10 tips are the 10 tips. They're not, the practicality of hiring a contractor and having them rebuild your house isn't going to differ that much from state to state, even if the building codes do. So number 1, hire only state licensed contractors. Check the license number either online or by calling your state body that licensed contractors. Number 3, get at least 3 bids. Builders exchanges, sorry, I should back up a little bit. I am co-owner of Roar Construction. We're a small residential general construction company, and also executive director of Valley Contractors Exchange, which is a not-for-profit construction association. Builders exchanges exist all over. They're in Oregon and they're in Washington and they're all over the country. So no matter where you are, your local builders exchange can help you get 3 bids. If you need help getting in touch with your local builders exchange, I'm happy to help with that. And if they're not involved in your long-term recovery groups, get them involved. Construction is very specific, and unless you're in it in your shoes and boots every day doing it, it's really hard to kind of conceptualize the whole process. So do engage with your local builders exchange or association. I'm also one of the tri-chairs for our Campfire Long-Term Recovery Group Housing Committee. So there you go, wear a lot of hats, but there we go. Get at least, number 4, get at least 3 references from each bidder and review past work in person. Really have those conversations with their past clients. Make sure everything's in writing and only sign the contract if you completely understand the terms. I have heard instances more than I care to from contractors kind of doing that high pressure sales gimmick. Don't fall for that. You can get 3 bids, even in little Butte County where over 14,000 homes were destroyed. Anybody in my community that says I can't get 3 bids, I can help you get 3 bids. There's plenty of contractors out there that are willing to bid your project, and they vary widely. I mean, I cannot specify, I can't say that enough. They just vary so widely, even for little projects. So do get 3 bids and put everything in writing. Ask if the contractor has employees, and if so, make sure they have workers' comp for that. In California, avoid paying more than 10% down or $1,000, whichever is less. In other words, if I'm in a contract with a contractor to build my house, I can only give them, they can only ask me for $1,000 down, no matter if they need to upfront put $100,000 out of their pocket. They can only ask the clients for $1,000. That's going to vary from state to state, so check on your laws. As a contractor, wearing my contractor hat, we have $100,000 that sits in our reserve accounts, and we're a very small company. We only do 1 or 2 builds at a time, so it's expected that a builder will have that in reserve. Number 8, avoid letting payments get ahead of the work. Your contract, which is in writing and signed by all parties, should have a clear draw schedule, aka payment schedule, that says after the foundation is in, you get this percentage. After framing and dry-in and your four-way is complete, you get this amount. So it should have a really clear draw schedule of when those payments are going to be made. Keep a job file of all papers relating to your project, including payments. So just everything, create a binder, start sticking everything in there. And then number 10, avoid making the final payment until you're satisfied with the job. So don't make final payment until all the work has been completed. You will end your project with a punch list, so make sure all those punch list items are completed. Understand how legislation affecting the disaster recovery in these disaster areas might affect you. For instance, in California, there's legislation that passed, SB 1189, that it provides additional consumer protection, but it also it requires a whole new contract to be utilized. So as a general contractor, we typically, if we're going to build a house for somebody, we have a prime contract that we provide. In California, that's not the one you're going to use, and it's property specific. It needs to be a home improvement contract. So that provides additional safety or precautions, including a right to rescind. So if you're under the age of 65, you have 3 days to change your mind, and you actually have to initial that on the contract. If you're over the age of 65, you have a 5-day notice of a right to cancel. So if that contractor doesn't give you that right to cancel, you can basically go through the entire build and then at the end say, guess what, I'm not going to pay you because you didn't give me my right to cancel, and they will have no leg to stand on. So scary but true. So you do need to utilize a home improvement contract, and it is property specific, not who you're building it for specific. So as a fire survivor, if I sell my property and then somebody comes in and hires a contractor to build it, that still need to use that home improvement contract. And it seems weird because it's home improvement when the entire thing is destroyed, but there you go. And there might also be legislation in your state which may alleviate some of the requirements. For instance, in California with the 2019 building codes, all new residential construction has to have solar on it with a few exceptions. There is an exception for that in California for properties in nationally declared disaster zones. Rebuild Paradise Foundation and our association are working very hard to get that extended to disasters declared up to 2020. Right now, I believe it's 2019. Could be 18, 2019. All right, so do know how legislation in your area affects your rebuild. Change orders, there will be changes to your project. And let me back up a little bit and say, you can come up with house plans a number of different ways. And Charles is with Rebuild Paradise, is gonna talk to the good work that they're doing with master plans. That's one thing. Plans that have been conditionally approved to build with whatever building department your jurisdiction is under. You just have to get like a site plan and some other things done. Alternatively, a lot of general contractors have their own set floor plans that they build to. So if you're considering hiring a contractor and you don't have house plans built, ask them if they have plans that they typically build that they can adapt for the lot that you're looking at. Or you can hire an architect and go through the actual process of building or designing that house specific to your lot. Depending on the level of time and resources you have, that might vary. We'd need to talk to that more. I'm happy to speak to that subject a little more. No matter what you go with, there will be changes to your project. Get it in writing, utilize change orders, make sure it's all in writing, make sure it's spelled out how much that's going to cost. And if it's a change in materials, build methods, make sure that's all very clear and in writing and signed by both parties, both you and your contractor. If you run into trouble, I'll just say that the California State or Contractor State License Board in California, there's an intake and mediation center. If you have any questions, if things don't feel right, you can contact them. You can also contact your local builders exchange. And we'll even do things like look over your contract for you and say, does this look all okay? So there you go. Things to consider. And these are things that your state agencies won't necessarily tell you. Do feel comfortable with your contractor. You're going to have a very close relationship for them for at least a year. If it doesn't feel comfortable right off the bat, maybe find somebody else that you feel more comfortable with. It's only going to get worse if you have communication issues as the project progresses. Fun fact, most county court records are publicly available. So if I'm going to consider hiring a contractor, I would certainly Google their name and make sure that they haven't been sued by other subcontractors or suppliers or that kind of thing. So that one, I wish I could tell everybody, so spread that one far and clear, wide and far. If you're building in California, the CSLB issued their 1 millionth contractor's license in 2015. So if your contractor's license number starts with the number 1, ask for references, ask for how many homes they've actually built from the ground up. In disaster areas, a lot of contractors will transition from doing like smaller residential remodel or addition projects to building full from the ground up. It's a much different build than it is to remodel something. So do ask that question. Have you actually ever built a new home before? And if so, how many, and can I get references? Or go take a look at them. Something I tell contractors, in most cases, the fire survivors never wanted to build a house, or perhaps they've already built their house, their dream home, and it just burned down, so they didn't want to rebuild it again. Be gentle with them, understand, and be patient. It's a process. And then finally, and this is, again, definitely in California, I don't know how it equates to Washington or Oregon. If anybody else does, I'm happy to be enlightened. But the person who pulls the building permit owns it. So if I'm gonna build a house, if my company's gonna build a house for Pam, and I go in and I pull that building permit, and then later things go south between Pam and I, and she wants to fire me, don't fire that contractor without first checking with your building department and about what that means for your building permit. I know in Santa Rosa, in many cases, there was an unscrupulous company that was charging, 5 figures to transfer that building permit over. So when possible, if it's a little more work for yourself, but do pull the building permit yourself so that you own it in case things go bad with your contractor. Questions so far? Sorry, I tend to talk quickly, so if you have questions, feel free to shout out. How to address problems. Make sure you talk to your contractor, make sure you have good communication, put everything in writing. Read your contract very carefully, clarify disagreements or things that are unclear. If in doubt, if you doubt what you're being told, verify with other licensed contractors or consult with your local building department. Finally, mistakes will happen throughout a large project. Give your contractor a chance to correct mistakes and discuss them calmly and professionally. I mean, who would have seen, when we were thinking about rebuilding after the campfire, who saw COVID coming, right? So material prices went through the roof, build times went through the roof. When you're talking about big lifts and places where thousands of structures have been destroyed, some specialty trades, I call electricians golden unicorns and plumbers silver pegasuses because you cannot find them. There's holdups in the build if you have trouble locating one of those specialty trades. The other thing I would say is that not all builds are the same. Rebuilding in Paradise and Butte County is very, very, very different than rebuilding in Santa Rosa. In Santa Rosa, the lots are flat. There's infrastructure to support that. You know where you have to pull your conduit for your electrical, and you know you're going to tie into the sewer trunk line, and you know where your water's coming from, or your natural gas. That is not the case in rural communities like Paradise. And I assume a lot of the places that we're talking about in Oregon and Washington, there is no sewer. We're all on septic. There's no flat lot. So you can't hire one contractor and have them come in and build 10 homes in a row. It just doesn't work that way in these rural areas. So it creates a whole unique thing. So, just be aware of that, the challenges in your own community, make those very clear and discuss them if you're in long-term recovery groups with your housing committees. Try to obtain a basic understanding of how construction works. For example, your general contractor, if you will hire me, I'm not required to provide you with receipts for materials or actual costs for my subcontractors. I will provide you a one number. It will cost you, if you want to hire me, it's going to cost you $500,000 to build your house. But I don't have to give you the 3 bids that I got for my electrical or my plumbing or whatnot. Those are relationships that general contractors have built up for many, many years. And they do typically mark up their time for that in dealing with them. They'll add 10 to 20% to those bids. So we're not required to give those bids to homeowners. And also the licensee is not required to be on the job site. And the employees are not required to be licensed contractors. If your expectation is that your general contractor is going to be on the job site, ask them if they self-perform their work. Our company, we do self-perform. My husband, who is the licensed general contractor, is on the job at least once during the day and frequently more often than that. But there are plenty of general contractors that don't self-perform any of their work. They sub it all out, from everything from their foundation to their finished work. It varies. We self-perform concrete framing, basically everything but electrical, mechanical, plumbing, icky things like insulation. So just, if you are expecting them to be on site, ask if it's self-perform, and if so, what trades. If the job is taking too long, ensure you understand why the delays are happening. Have those conversations with your contractors before you act. COVID, material prices, who saw all that coming? There will be holdups, and just make sure you understand them before you jump to conclusions. That's all I have. Thank you, everybody. And I'm happy to answer any questions and talk through alternative build methods, because that is something that we tackle a lot in our own housing committee with our Campfire Long-Term Recovery Group. Questions?
One thing I wanted to put out there, and thank you so much, Amy, for that overview, is I think there may be one or two people on the call who may know if some of those things are different in Oregon. I noticed Sky Stewart is on the call. He's a residential contractor. Do you know if anything that Amy called out would be marked like very different in Oregon? I don't know if you're able to unmute. Sky, you're muted.
Sorry, guys, I'm struggling.
Okay.
Question again, is stuff in Oregon different than what Amy was talking
around some of those regulations that we have in California about the builder holding the permit, the $1,000 limit, and some of those things. Is that pretty much the same in Oregon, or are there?
No, there's quite a few differences there. I was actually that was where I got lost in the Zoom chain, was trying to look up the things that Amy was referring to. So the house I just completed was an entirely time materials contract for a full house. I had significant deposits so that I could get materials ordered. That was a struggle with COVID. So there are some significant differences in Oregon than there are in California.
I see. And that was all baked into your contract, that you'd be able to get those advances on funding?
Yeah, I was working with the homeowner specifically, but there was another homeowner that I had a chance to work with that, because of their requirements with their lender and the way, the disaster funding was going to be able to be released to them, they needed a fixed price contract, and I couldn't offer that to them because of what was happening with volatility with materials. So I said, either you're going to lose because material prices are going to go down, or I'm going to lose because material prices go up, and I just can't offer. It sounds like Amy's business might be a smidge bigger than mine. We typically have one house going at a time versus one or two. And so to pay for somebody else's house because of material volatility just wasn't an option. And they had to find another builder who was more set up for higher volume stuff and higher risk situation. It's really challenging.
In California, the time and materials contracts are illegal. So that's, I mean, go figure, California, right?
Yeah, so there will be differences. And I would say, like Amy said, if there is a contractor's exchange in your area, check in with those folks to find out what the parameters are. We'll have more time for questions at the end, or you could put them in the chat. I would love to move over to hear from Charles in Paradise with the work that you did, the challenges that you saw for people who want to rebuild, and then what some of the resources you've put together to help them.
Thank you, Pam. Hi, everybody. My name is Charles Brooks. I'm the outgoing executive director of the Rebuild Paradise Foundation and the chief operating officer at After the Fire. My family and I lost our home in the Camp Fire. I was not in disaster recovery before that, and it was seeing our community.
Charles.
that made us start the Rebuild Paradise Foundation. First off, I want to compliment Amy on so much. Yes.
I just
Yes, can
wanted
you
to
hear me?
say that
Is that better?
that is better. Keep your, Charles is on generator power because of storms they had. And so I think it's better to keep your video off. We can hear you better. Mhm.
Apparently, Paradise is in need of a major internet upgrade because after 12 hours of the power being out, our internet goes down. So I'm working off a hotspot. So thank you, Pam, for the heads up.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that you heard, but we started the Rebuild Paradise Foundation as a way to help the community and just identify gaps in the recovery and see how a few of us could work with community partners and to make a difference. And so we stood up projects as we were going through these personal experiences of rebuilding, and our friends were in our community, and saying, like, how can we make this easier for people? Because so many of us never planned on building a house in our entire life. And I have to tell you that Amy is one of those partners along the way that has just truly been a godsend to all of us, because her knowledge and her passion for wanting to serve the community is seldom seen in recovery. And so we're really lucky all along the way. There's so many times when I've been able to reach out to Amy and say, we're working on this, the friend side of it, when I'm frustrated with my own contractor, and Amy can calm me down, or somebody else can calm me down and say, hey, that's all part of this. Our build took 1 year and 4 months, and we were in the middle of COVID delays, and I was just tired. I just wanted to be home, and Amy helped bring perspective to some of those conversations. So I would encourage you to reach out to her if you've got any questions that you don't want to mention on the Zoom. But really getting back to what we did at the Rebuild Paradise Foundation is we were looking at what are the challenges that are unique to our community that our government partners and other organizations are not tackling right now, and how can we, with our skill set, tackle some of those. And so we've developed, one of the things Pam was referring to is a master plan library of floor plans. And I was going to share my screen, but since my internet is not good, I'm not going to share it. But you can go to rebuildparadise.org, and I'll put that in the chat. And you can look at, under the resources tab, you can look at what's called the residential floor plan library. We worked with architects and engineers from around Northern California to develop a set of master plans. They were master planned to the town of Paradise and to Butte County planning process, and then made them available on our website, a connection resource where people get connected with the master plans, where then they're still working with that design professional to create a site plan and the construction documents. But we've taken the time and the cost out of doing a custom home design. They still have to make it fit their unique property, like Amy highlighted, having the ability to identify where your critical infrastructure is. Where's your septic tank? Where does your water come in? Where does your natural gas? Where's power? And then we've got to accommodate for slope a lot. So within those building plans, they all have things to them, like you can have a slab on grade, or you can have a raised foundation. So you can take advantage of most slopes and most topographies that we're dealing with. The two big things that come out of this master planning process, and I'm really excited to see even some of the jurisdictions in newly fire affected areas are taking on this challenge of creating master plans. The big values are, number one, you're saving people a tremendous amount of. Professionals are overwhelmed immediately with homes that they have to design. And so you've got design professionals who just don't have the capacity to get your home design started. Then you have to go through the design process, which can be 2 to 6 months, sometimes longer. Then you have to go through plan submittal, then you've got corrections, then you might have a resubmittal and a few more corrections until the thing is given a building permit. With all of these plans, all of the truss calculations, the structural calcs, the energy calcs, all of those things are done. And so all that has to happen are the site specifics. And this is basically taking a ton of time out of the design process, plus people are only paying for a site plan. And typically that's 10% of what the cost of a custom home design would be on these homes. Plus time and plan reviews. Some of our fastest permits have been issued in 3 to 4 business months or many, many weeks for a building permit. People now have a building permit within days. And so we have contractors that are actually referring people to these master plans. And if you go through our website and you look at some of these, I'd encourage you to look at the Mulberry or the Ridge Ranch. Those actually have video walkthroughs and fly arounds of homes that have been completed. So people can see actually what they look like when they're completed, not just elevations and a floor plan. Designing these plans, we provided a lot of community input. We actually had listening sessions where we invited members of the public to come into the architecture program at Chico State in a space where over the course of 3 or 4 meetings, a lot of information was given about what's important to people as they rebuild a home. What are the features? What are the aesthetics? And then we were able to provide that to design professionals so they could actually take these into account when they were designing these floor plans for us. And it really worked out well. And what we're finding now is that as we're listening to the changes in the recovery now, 3 years past the campfire, this next set of master plans that's going to come out in a couple of weeks is actually addressing a lot of the concerns that have come up in the last year based on. So that's an important thing for us, is that we keep improving the process and that we keep revisiting these to make sure that the plans are useful for the community as it goes forward. So to those of you on the call who might be residents who are looking to rebuild, or maybe you're design professionals, or you're a representative from a local jurisdiction, this is a great way to look at speeding up the time to get people building homes, as well as showing people that you're listening and that you care, and that you're invested in them and you want to see them be able to move through what is a very complicated process. I like to give the analogy, because this is true in my life. I actually was in construction for 3 years right out of college. And even then, I never wanted to build a custom home in my entire life. I just wanted to buy a home, remodel it, paint some walls, plant some flowers, and guess what? We're home. That is so many of the people in our community. They never wanted to be in this place. And now, how can we give them a hand up? In conjunction with master plans, we've also developed a series of grants that support a lot of the pre-construction costs that go along with getting your site ready, because we recognize getting to the point of being able to build a home takes time and money and somebody at your side. So we really wanted to show people that we're here to help them walk that journey. We have a bunch of other resources that are helping in the recovery as a whole, but those are 2 of the real significant ones. And one thing I did want to highlight, because we are going to talk about different building types and different building technologies, is one of our homes was actually redesigned as an ICF home, and that was an ask of our local Habitat for Humanity. So Habitat for Humanity is even using our master plans, and they're going to start building a couple of other master plans. So there's opportunities for partnerships with other organizations, that as you build tools to meet the needs of your community, other organizations will be able to leverage those too, so they can be more efficient in their work and be able to deliver resources more effectively. That's kind of it on the floor plan library side and resources. Pam, was there anything else you wanted me to highlight?
I think that's a great introduction, and because I'm sticking to an hour on this call, I would love to transfer over, and we'll take questions in the chat or at the end if there's. And by the way, since you couldn't see it, probably I did share my screen and gave a little overview of the residential floor plan library resources while you were talking, so people could see that. It's an amazing resource. So much work went into it, so many partners. And California building codes are pretty high level. And so I feel like you're in Oregon, go ahead and grab these. I'm sure they're probably meeting your codes, I'm thinking, because ours are pretty strict. Do you think so, Charles?
I would definitely agree. And most of our design professionals have said, while they can't work in other states or in other counties, they're really focused on doing the work here. Most of them are willing to have conversations and share concepts and share things with other communities. They just won't be able to do the work on your behalf just because they're so busy here.
Right. Yeah. Well, excellent. That's great. As a fire survivor myself, And of course, I actually love design. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think there was a time at one point in my life where I thought, oh, maybe I should be an architect. Okay, I'm not an architect and I never went down that path, but I am intrigued by it. And my house, I liked my house. I lived in my house for 20 years, but man, there were things I wanted different about my house. I mean, I didn't like the configuration of the bedrooms, and I thought maybe the kitchen shouldn't be so closed off. And there were things I wish were different about my house. So truth be told, when my house burned down, oh, that was horrible, horrible. But was I going to rebuild the same house? Not a chance, because there were so many things I wish were different about my house. But how do you even begin to think about what are my options? First, of course, I had to know, like, well, how much money am I going to have to work with? And then I tried to save money by using a pre-designed plan rather than hiring an architect from scratch, which I was successful with. And my builder had an architect that he had a relationship with that came along with my contract, so that they were able to adapt a pre-existing plan to that site and make sure it worked. But we got something going, we got our plan approved, and then I learned about an advanced energy rebate. And I learned about gray water. And I learned about these resilient things that I could have incorporated into my initial permit application, but I just didn't really know about them yet. I wasn't ready. I hadn't done all that homework. And because, man, I was trying to recover from a disaster. I had a lot going on. And meanwhile, everybody's like raising their family and doing their job at the same time as trying to plan this house. So in California, there are these things called advanced energy rebates. I was able to go back and make adjustments to my original plan so that I could take advantage. And with mine, I was able to get a $14,000 rebate. What did I have to do? I was going to do solar anyway. So I had to make sure it was, I had solar, and then I had to do better insulation through the whole thing. I had to make it 20% better than code. And I was able to get all these different things. If I had done an all electric, I would have gotten $17,000 back. And so it's good to know about some of these options. I've looked, it's available in different counties, not just Sonoma County. So take a look at your power we have Sonoma Clean Power. If you have another clean power option where you live, and see if they're offering that rebate, because I've noticed it's in some other counties as well. Maybe some things like that for energy rebates exist in Oregon, I'm not sure. But even to think about gray water, like I couldn't do it because I did a slab foundation and I couldn't put gray water in for my showers. But I was able to put it in for my laundry and then work it into my landscaping plan so I can keep more water on my property. And now after the fact, I'm thinking about doing roof water capture, because we live in drought, and water, fire, all these things are related, and anything I can do to make my home more resilient, I'm going to try to do. So if those are things that maybe you haven't even thought about, or your community hasn't thought about, I mean, really, gray water, laundry to landscape is really cheap and easy to do. But you have to plan for it. So those were some of the things that I did after the fact, but probably would have been easier if I had thought about it before I put my plans into the planning office. Figure out what different perspectives are available to you. That being said, I'd like to transfer over to Sasha Butler, one of my heroes, so she can tell you about some of the things she's learned through the process. And Sasha has a background working in design and architecture. So she came with that wonderful background into this work, but what a heart she has to help people too, and has really been such a big boost. So hi, Sasha, good to see you this morning.
You too, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Everything Amy and Charles and you, Pam, said is just so spot on. I think that a lot of the takeaways from what Amy presented on the contractors side of things with vetting and absolutely getting, at least references and seeing work in person, just to give you an idea. So I did not lose my house. It was my fiance's house, but I had spent 6 years there. So when the house burned down, we immediately started working on plans. And this being an opportunity to build what you want. So there's that emotional component of, here's an opportunity to have my dream house. and looking at it more from that perspective than the practicality of how quick a master plan is. This wasn't something we really understood at that point. In hindsight, I think that a lot of people that went down the rabbit hole of designing their own homes would have rather done the master plan. We still have friends now 4 years later who don't have a home. And I can't wrap my head around what life must be like for them trying to get home. We got the plans, we went through plan check, everything was great. We hired a builder that many builders had come to our area and given presentations, you know, that they were here to help us. Per square foot costs were presented that really we attached to that whole per square foot cost of rebuilding. And of course, the lowest one that came in was promising, you know, we can get your house, we can get it built under a year. I think maybe 30 people signed up with him. Long story short, they didn't fulfill their promise to a majority of their people. They are in some sort of legal action, but I want to point out that with CSLB, the Contractor State License Board for California, and this is a real emphasis that many kind of push, that you've got to check and make sure their license is active. And even this builder who basically stole money and left town, their license is still not suspended. If you go to the CSLB website, it's inactive, or it's expired, I'm sorry. They actually have 5 different licenses. The most current one that they're under inactive status for because it's expired, you really have to dig in and see that there were violations and that these people almost went to jail. They're not in jail. So we didn't build with them. We backed out actually very early on and hired another builder who was also—
Can I add, my neighbor across the street lost $170,000 to them. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of damage, yeah.
It's gut-wrenching, and there's still no resolve.
Yeah.
So the CSLB is great to a point, but they should not be the end all be all. Absolutely vet your builders through references. Have they ever even built a house from ground up before? Because many come in that were simply remodelers, and they're like, here's an opportunity to rebuild for these people. And I think many had good intentions, but not all. So we signed up with a builder who was offering custom builds, all based on a couple of Facebook posts by other homeowners that had signed up and were wowed by this guy. He ended up signing, I think, almost again 30 rebuilds. Did a pretty good job, but the expectation levels were never set. And I think that's a really big point for a lot of people rebuilding, especially with custom and maybe even the master plan, is the process of plan check. You know, you have your design professional who builds or designs your house, and then you have the plan checker with your jurisdiction that reviews for code. And then you have your builder and you have your building inspectors. And so you would think that with all these 4 parties that all bases would be covered. But what people don't tell you is they're not checking if your doors close properly, if your hardware on your kitchen cabinets is installed right. You know, all the little minutia of the actual house that you see and live in is not looked at. And so that expectation level for many people, and still to this day, is that why didn't the building inspector catch that I don't have door stops or that my light switches are upside down? That's not things that the building inspector looks for. So I think really understanding expectations and setting those off the bat is huge. I also think another really big point is the whole payment process, milestones. Many people got way ahead of payments to their builders because, hey, we need to order framing lumber, and so we need another $35,000, and you're at the mercy. And it's an emotional process, which I think a lot of people tend to forget, that you are afraid that if you don't pay that money, that your builder's going to leave you. And really understanding the desperation of wanting to get home and what people are willing to do that is unreasonable. And really working with that and understanding and recognizing it in yourself that you really need to take a step back and look at what's happening and question things and ask neighbors for help and understanding, and don't be afraid to talk to your builder about concerns that you have, and hiring a third-party inspector from the get-go, somebody that's going to come in and evaluate the progress, maybe even somebody who holds your money in an escrow account so that the builder is being paid out through them. Because many of these people got paid out. My fiance got paid out in a lump sum for his build. So he had the money. The builder knew he had his money. So there was no question that the bank had to review anything, progress milestones, whereas a third-party inspector can come in, see that things are actually at the point to get paid out, and evaluate also quality of work, whereas the building inspector is looking for code, fire safety, all that stuff. And the inspector, I think, is a huge asset, and it's not a ton of money in the big scheme of things. Making sure you get your final. A lot of people are still in temporary occupancies. The city has they have a 90-day temp occupancy standard that they've set with the city of Santa Rosa, but it's not upheld. We have a friend, neighbor, 3 years in, still does not have his final, has CSLB working on it. He's had them involved for 3 years. The CSLB really is overworked, understaffed. They don't have much skin in the game for it. They're not pressuring the builder. There's no indication on the CSLB site that this builder actually has probably 10 complaints filed against them, but nothing's been substantiated, so it's not a violation. So, I mean, really, the big takeaway is just having all your ducks in a row, having all your questions, understanding that you're an emotional mess and that you're gonna make mistakes, but reaching out for help and really understanding and setting expectations and getting a third-party inspector 100%. I think many would have been saved a lot of headache had they gone that route.
Yeah, that kind of consumer advocacy. That's what I see. The city has its, or the county, or wherever your permit is coming from, has a role that's very important, and their inspectors as well. The builders have their role, but I found that there was a gap in needing to help with, as a consumer, what do I have to watch out for and what tools do I have when things go south? Yeah. And so our organization, Coffee Strong, that's our neighborhood organization that we formed. Sasha was in there with me. We never did any recommendations, hire this builder. Oh, believe me, no. We were not in that. We were not doing that, but we did gather information about the different builders and shared it. Here's what we've heard. Here's what they say they can offer. And we did share a list of vetting questions that were appropriate for our builds. And I dug it up. It's like 3 years old, but vetting questions. When you go meet with a potential builder, ask them all these questions. And we didn't tell people what answers you were looking for, right? But make sure you ask these questions and not dive into something too quick. Also, we have a legal aid, which was free to us. And I know there's legal aid in Oregon too. Before you sign a contract, please have someone review it and explain it to you so that you understand what commitment you're about to make, because it's a big long-term commitment. I was able to get mine reviewed for free via legal aid. And so if you don't have a lawyer to pay, that you want to pay, that may be available to you in Oregon or California. Charles has his hand up. Charles, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, a couple of things that Sasha mentioned, and I wanted to circle back to something that Amy had said, that if you can't afford a third-party inspector, you live in a very rural place where third-party inspectors are hard to come by. In a lot of communities, there are retired general contractors that if you ask around, they may be available and might come out and just help you. My father-in-law was a retired general contractor, and we'd have him just come down every couple of weeks and just walk the job site with us to make sure things that I wasn't even paying attention to. And he'd point him out, and I just had a casual conversation with my contractor just to ask questions. And guess what? We caught 3 or 4 things that even my contractor didn't catch that his subs did, because my contractor was building 12 houses at the time, and he normally builds 3 a year. The other thing is this whole emotional roller coaster of a rebuild, as you're either counseling people, you're working with people, you're going through it yourself. Really, that relationship with a contractor, our contractor told us we're going to be married. And so like, it's going to be a marriage for the next 1.5 years, and ours is still going. And that dynamic, when you're figuring out your contractor's level of fit and finish, do they build to the quality you expect, when you're reviewing their referrals that they gave you of people they built homes for in the past. The other thing you want to do is spend enough time with that contractor to know that their communication style is something that you are comfortable with. If they don't return your emails timely, or if they don't call you back, and that's an expectation of yours, set that in the beginning. And if they're not going to meet it, maybe you need to look for another contractor, because there's going to be times when you're emotionally charged and they're communicating the way that they always have, or not communicating the way that they always have. And that is going to be an issue for you. So knowing how they communicate ahead of time is going to help you a lot. And that's something we've had to kind of work with our contractor, is we didn't really evaluate communication style and our expectations of how often we want to be communicated with. And so that's something that we've just had to own, because we didn't do that. And I would highly recommend, if you're advising people or if you're going through that, to add that to your list of things when you're trying to decide on your contractor.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Michael, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Pamela. Good to see you.
Yeah.
so appreciate the advocacy. For folks who are listening to this call after the fact, I can't say enough about the organization Pam is affiliated with, as well as Charles at Rebuild Paradise. Here in Oregon, we have benefited greatly from their knowledge and expertise and compassion. I just wanted to add to my comments in the chat, because I didn't know to what extent these would be visible to folks afterwards. But really pay attention, and Pamela caught this, and then several others added to it, is this notion of what's available through potential state resources. And here in Oregon, it will be a multitude. And it, unfortunately, we're trying to make it as easy to navigate as possible, but like many things related to disaster recovery, there's a paper process to it. So we're trying to get some grants out for both fire hardening as well as energy efficiency. And that's in conjunction with the work that Energy Trust of Oregon is doing. So it will really behoove residents to reach out and learn more about these programs, make sure their builders aware, and it really is part of that Build Back Better. So please make my contact information available so that down the road, if Oregonians have questions about where to turn, I can help. Thank you.
Excellent. And I think when I post this on YouTube, the recording, I will copy that comment with a link in the description, if that helps. You know, thank you for saying that, because there are so many innovations happening now, and I have found that asking your builder first might not always be the person to check in with first, because we were wanting to do the gray water, and actually that was the first time my builder had ever done it. And he was nice, and he says, Pam, whatever you want, we'll figure it out. But you know, we heard other neighbors saying we wanted to have that option, and the builder just said, well, no, you don't want that. And I think it was a cover for like, I don't know how to do that. And rather than you know, because the consumer wanted it, they wanted to save water, spend less on water, have a resilient house. But I think that there's, you know, then you also have to, when you look for a builder, find one who maybe has some experience with those things. I have another friend who's building only out of the more fire resistant panels, and there wasn't really very many people who were able to do that. I mean, sadly, it's 4 years later, she's still working on her rebuild, because the workforce just wasn't really prepared here to do those things. Now more people are getting trained in that, but you may want to do a build a certain way. Are there people available in my area to actually do that build? And we need to make sure that we're making sure training is happening in our areas and to bring these more fire resistant and resilient methods to our construction trades locally. Let's see.
If I may, Pam, real quick, I'll comment on that too. I mean,
Yeah.
you wanting to implement gray water, your contractor might be resistant, but he's got to sell it to his plumber. And honestly,
Yeah.
those silver Pegasuses and golden unicorns have so much work to take the time and energy to learn a new method. They just isn't a lot of motivation because they have more work than they can handle anyway. So it is all the way down the chain can be a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Another thing that we did as at Coffee Strong as our neighborhood organization is we made something called a builder matrix. And we did legwork to interview the builders that were all like emerging, saying, oh, we can help you, we can help you. We asked them questions like, okay, what is your capacity? How many rebuilds do you think you can do? What type of, will you be able to help people with their insurance estimate? Will you, what's included? Are you going to include landscaping or is it just the house? Is all different kinds of questions. And we just created a big grid matrix of information and then who to contact. Also, they were coming up with estimates on price per square foot. There may be like what Skye was mentioning earlier, people who will give you a flat price, or it's going to vary depending on materials. What terms are they working under? And any of you who are working in local organizations trying to support, you could do that. You could create like, here's what we're hearing. And then you're not recommending any of them over that. Now, when we started to hear about some problems with certain builders, we just deleted them from the list. Yeah.
I compiled a list. If you've got a builders association that's trusted, they can call the GCs and compile that and just keep it completely anonymous. And it's not just build prices. Bid those out with like low end, like apartment grade finishes, medium end finishes, high end finishes, because they want the finishes, but also what's the site prep cost? Because when you're talking about disasters, those lots that are, over excavated, to fill and compact those lots for, site prep costs were ranging between like $2,500 and $75,000 just on how much they had to bring in.
And in our area, like you said, we were flat, but we've had 4 fires and we've got hillside, we've got geohazard, we've got things like that here in the Sonoma County area that people have had to deal with that are difficult. So a lot of things to consider, but I'm just thinking at those of you on this call who are community leaders, just to help gather some information or even questions that folks could ask before they really make their big decisions. That can be really helpful because they might not be aware of what those are. And I found that since there are more and more disasters, our state licensing board has some resources like that, some lists of questions that you might ask. I believe that they also have some of those things on the Oregon Contractors Board website. Use those tools, use them. People are in trauma and they've gone through a lot and they just want it to be done, but don't skip those steps because later, if it's going to mean that you can't finish the build because the contractor went south or you ran out of money or anything, it's just so heartbreaking later to see that somebody doesn't make it home. And sadly, that's in some of the cases, that's what we've had to see here in the North Bay fires, where things between the contractor and the homeowner didn't work out and the house never got done, or they left and somebody had to take over. And that's hard to find a contractor who's willing to take over another person's work as well. They don't like to do that. And so anyway, thank you all so much for being here. Does anyone have any other questions or comments leading out of this hour? I'm really grateful for you all that you were all here, and we'll be sending you a link to the recording of this that you could share with others in your community.
I would direct one question at Michael, actually, and it's thank you everybody for such great information. I want to first do that, but Michael, could you tell me what area you were affected by or what area you were helping in?
Yeah, certainly. I'm based in Oregon and assisting on any of the counties impacted by the wildfires in the state.
Okay, so Marion County would also count in that?
Yes, correct.
Okay, well, yeah, definitely like to get your contact information and perhaps further questions down the road, but
Yeah,
Absolutely.
happy to do that. That's why I'm here.
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I should have done a more formal introduction for Michael. Michael Mortar is the Wildfire Recovery Ombudsman for the Oregon Office of Emergency Management, a wonderful resource. We're lucky after the fire to have gotten to know Michael and learned so much from him. And I know Jennifer Gray Thompson, who is our CEO, has known him for a long time, and I've known him for a little while since coming on to this. And he's a great resource. So definitely, when I send out the recording and post it, I will include your information, Michael.
Great. Thanks, Pam.
Great.
And thanks to everyone else. I really appreciate you being here and being leaders in your area and helping people get back home. And in better houses, let's hope. Better, safer, more resilient homes. Have a wonderful day and happy holidays to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.